Yeah? Okay. The name of the story that I'm going to read is My Mother, La Polvadera. And I'll just explain a little bit. La Polvadera was a real life person that I wrote about in a writing assignment a long time ago, that the teacher said it was a coming of age story, okay? And I lived in Salinas, walked past John Steinbeck's house, and dreamed of becoming a writer. Okay? La Polvadera was a real person, but she was not my mother. But I loved to be in her company. She was always singing, dancing, and lived life to the fullest. So even though she was not really my mother, I do think that I inherited her love of music, dancing, and love of life, simply by osmosis. My mother, La Polvadera. My mother was a barmaid waitress at different bars in different barrios. She was called La Polvadera, the dusty one. And I never knew if she earned it by her claim that she could raise dust wherever she danced, or whether it was from all the body and face powders that she wore. Well, it was probably from both of those things. Since she was a night shift worker, she slept all day while I went to school, and I would wake her when I got home. She would take a long hot shower and would come out of the bathroom with a towel wrapped around her head and wearing her avocado green and orange blossom terry cloth robe. Her showers revitalized her, and she would hum and sing as she began to get ready for work. Fascinated, I would sit on the edge of the bed we shared and watch her get ready. She always seemed nervous, and she'd applied her cosmetics with quick, fluttering movements, glancing at the clock on the dresser as though waiting for a stage manager to come give her the 5-minute signal for her grand entrance. Her mask didn't take long. She would brush several coats of black mascara on her naturally long eyelashes and give her eyebrows quick feathering strokes with the eyebrow pencil. Her lips and cheeks were painted a cherry red, and she would press her lips and smile and wink at me through the mirror. Then, with a sweeping flourish, she would get the eyebrow pencil, and like a haughty movie star preparing to give an autograph, she'd draw a beauty mark on her right cheek. Inevitably, the beauty mark lasted no more than 5 minutes after she got to the bar, because her dancing partners always ended up with it instead. "Sip me up, honey," she always asked. I would jump and help her with the finishing touches. I remember her dresses were bright, wild designs, or shimmering gold or silver material. You could spot her coming down Meyer Street 2 blocks away. A fragrant mist seemed to follow her, and she would very generously spray her current favorite perfume, sometimes My Sin, sometimes Evening in Paris, and sometimes Taboo. If I decided, she used all 3 at various strategic points. "Lock the front door and back doors and don't answer the phone. Want me to bring you a hamburger or chop suey?" "No thanks. I'll be asleep. Don't worry. I'll lock the doors." I was already 17, and we went through this routine every night. Actually, she needn't have worried about me, because oddly enough, our barrio neighbors liked and respected her, and they watched out for me, even though I never even bothered to talk to any of them. Thinking back now, it wasn't so odd that they liked her. Part of her code or principles or whatever she called it was that she never dated any of the barrio husbands. And if she met them out on the town on payday, she charmed them out of the paycheck and returned it to the family the following day. She just didn't mess with them. They were just garbage collectors, tiradichis. Yeah, they went to the bar in the dirty clothes after collecting garbage, drank 2 or 3 pitchers of beer, and then headed home back to their wives and families. I was never liked. Since very young, I had learned to escape into books, and I was always a smart ass in class. My English vocabulary got so good that I almost forgot Spanish. Besides, I never talked to the other kids, and the worst they could do to me was to call me a 4-eyed lambiona. And since I did wear glasses and was every teacher's pet, it didn't bother me at all. Not one bit. My mother and I never really had any conversations. She had her dances, and I had my books. We both knew that someday I would leave and never return. So we never discussed it. Once or twice we made attempts to reach each other, but the unvoiced feelings were already buried too deep. On New Year's Eve, 1957, she decided to stay home with me. I was sitting on the bed and she had just creamed her face. "Well, my serious owls, what are your thoughts?" she asked me without turning around. I answered the face on the mirror. "Nothing. I always sit here, don't I?" She stared at the reflection and smiled. "It's New Year's Eve, and it's going to be one hell of a night. Maybe I should stay home with you." "You don't have to. I'll be all right. Anyway, you say it's your favorite holiday, and you dance every single dance, and the tips are really good, especially at Jimmy's Chicken Shack." "I don't care, what the hell, I'll just call in sick. Hey, I'll even make us some buñuelos." "Make us what?" "I told you I was already forgetting Spanish." "Uh-huh, you see, you don't know everything. Buñuelos are like tortillas, but you deep fry them until they're puffy and crispy, and then you eat them with honey or syrup. We Mexicans have them on New Year's Eve all the time, and tamales. But I don't have time to make tamales. Anyway, I don't think I even know how to make them." "That sounds neat. Are you sure you won't go out tonight?" I was excited at the thought of my mother spending New Year's with me, but I tried to sound calm. "I'm positive, and to prove it, I won't put on my face." She grabbed the Kleenex and wiped off the face cream. An hour later, I sat at the table and I watched her knead the dough and form the balls for tortillas. We didn't have a radio, but she sang and danced quick steps as she rolled out the tortillas and flipped them into the bubbling fat and then into the platters, always singing and dancing. Her face glowed and her cheeks were naturally pink from the heat of the stove, and she had her hair pulled back from her face. She looked so pretty. I wanted to tell her that I loved her, no matter what. But she needed her audience, so she walked to the wall and banged on it until one of the Martinez kids answered, and she invited them all over. Why, I asked her, even though I knew there really was no answer that I would like to hear, because I just wanted her all to myself. And I surely did not want to share my night with her and the people next door. "Honey, they're my friends. I hardly see them. Anyway, they'll just stay a little while, okay?" The Martinez horde came over with tamales for her and more tortillas to fry. They sat her down and took over the cooking. Someone ran over next door and brought their record player and records. Soon the tiny kitchen was packed with laughing, dancing bodies, and my mother danced with all of them. She even danced with old Don Pedro, the grandfather who was almost stone deaf, but crazy over mambos, especially Mambo número 5 by Pérez Prado. Then they formed a conga line behind her, and they snaked from room to room singing la cucaracha, at the top of their lungs. When Don Pedro started to recite a real long play about El Bohemio, I went to our bedroom and locked out the noise in my mother. Even when they all left, I pretended to be asleep and didn't open the door for her to come to our bed. So she slept on the couch, covered with her robe. Next morning, I made her some coffee and took it to her. I couldn't talk, and she only looked at me questioningly. Then she smiled and took the coffee. That was in 1957, and in 1959, when I was 19, I graduated from high school. I left the barrio, and soon after, and I swore that I would never return. But 15 years later, I came back for her funeral. After the ritual, I stood across the street from the empty lot where our apartment had stood and watched the men with cranes and bulldozers knocking down the other houses on our street, and a big sign proudly proclaimed that this was to be an historic site and that demolished shacks would be authentically reproduced but changed to arts and crafts shops, cocktail lounges, and lawyers' offices. Before leaving, I took one last look at the empty lot, and my eyes went up to the sky, and I saw the forming swirls of dust. Dust devils, they call them. But I never saw the devil in the dust. Los remolinos, they will very soon come down and dust the streets, houses, sidewalks, and even the chicken coops. And I remembered my mother's singing, dancing, raising dust, and I danced down the street, stirring up the dust, just like my mother, La Polvadera. And I left again. Gracias.